Welcome to this episode of Inspirational People. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and today I get the opportunity of introducing you to Elizabeth Dixon. Elizabeth, say hello.
Hello.
Good to have you here. Connected through our mutual friend, Jessica Lalley. Elizabeth is a strategist, an innovator, and a speaking executive sharing on various personal and business development topics for organizations like the University of Georgia, Southwest Airlines, and the Global Leadership Summit, to name a few. While she first began working for the wellness of the Chick-fil-A staff, Elizabeth now leads the strategic design of hospitality and customer service across the stores. In this interview, we'll explore a variety of topics, including the challenges of a crisis and how they can be an opportunity for us to develop habits, cultivate culture, innovate in new directions, and proactively plan for the future. So Elizabeth, thank you for taking the time to share your life with us today. Before I jump into my questions, tell me about you and your story.
Well, awesome. Thank you for having me. This is
Yes, you're welcome.
exciting.
Yeah.
Well, a little bit about me. My name, Elizabeth. My purpose is to glorify God by creating value for my family and my community. I am entrepreneurial at heart.
Yeah.
And so my favorite thing to do is build what doesn't exist to be able to solve meaningful problems for people.
Yeah.
And I'm wife to my best friend and the love of my life, John. We are going to celebrate 10 years this fall.
Wow, congrats.
Yeah. Thank you. And we have a 6-year-old little boy and a 5-year-old little girl who are so much fun and keep us nice and busy. And we have become homeschool parents.
Yes, as we all have.
Which is a surprise for all of us.
Yeah.
So that's been fun. And go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, are you both working?
We are.
Yeah, I see. Thankfully, it's only one of us works, so it's a little bit easier. But imagine for dual working families, it's been very challenging.
It has been very challenging, full of laughter, flexibility. And what's really cute is that our 5 and 6-year-olds, their favorite thing to play now is meeting. Yeah. And so they'll come in and sit on some of our meetings. And then when we have our family lunch in the middle of the day, they love to play and take turns who facilitates the meeting.
Well, I've always had this idea that older kids should teach the younger grades. So maybe, that's a test market.
Our kindergartner can teach a preschooler.
Yeah. Now I'm curious. So you articulated your purpose statement, which was awesome. When did you do that, and why did you do that? Because a lot of people don't necessarily have that type of clarity in terms of their direction. So tell me about that.
Well, great question. So for me, I'm looking at my journal over here because I love goal setting. I love goals. I love planning. But the spot at the beginning of my journal, I had put purpose, and I had left it blank for a long time because it just seems so daunting and overwhelming. Such a big statement. Yeah. And so I could plan out annual or quarterly, all those kind of goals, but the purpose just felt too big. And about 5 months ago, I thought it shouldn't be that way because your purpose is so directional and critical. And when you go through a really unstable time, your purpose can be something that helps keep you constant and steady. And so I thought, why does it have to be so hard? And I came up with 3 questions that helped me craft mine. And then I found that was a felt need across. And so before COVID-19 came, I did a number of talks for folks to help them craft their purpose statements, to set up why does it matter, and then what are the key questions to ask yourself, and what are some of the, key tactics to do in order to set yourself up for success with defining it. And so that's how I came to mine, because I felt like it shouldn't stay blank, and I really needed it to help create that stability and like propelling me forward to where I'm wanting to go.
Okay, that's awesome. And so let me ask this, because I've embraced that, and for me, some of that came out of a crisis. Like the crisis itself was a catalyst, and my purpose statement is to embrace the life of Jesus, and so the life he lived, and then the life he gave, and so I've spent a lot of time, and it's kind of morphed over the years, but sort of where I landed. But when you're talking to other people about purpose and articulating that purpose and discovering that, there can be a lot of resistance. So have you found that as well? And how have you sort of persuaded people to sort of push through that resistance?
Yeah, I remember one particular talk where there was a gentleman sitting in the audience, like straight in front of me who had this look like, you kidding me? Like, I'm
So
wasting
he
my
was the
life right
skeptic
now.
or the cynic.
Total skeptic. And I think some of the reason are some people just aren't really wired for that.
Yeah.
And some of us eat it up. I eat that stuff up. I think you eat that stuff up. Some people just, that's not their jam, and that's okay. I
Yeah.
think for those that do spend that time thinking about where am I going and what do I want to be doing, I think that it's a useful tool to help
Hmm.
with that. And the other thing I think is the other group that might be a bit skeptical is it's uncomfortable. So they want to have it, but they feel so overwhelmed by it. And so something that I find really helpful is going, what is it right now? Like
Mm.
where I sit today is not where I'm going to sit 10 years from now. And so it can change, and be
Yeah.
comfortable with being able to edit and
Yeah.
just grow with time. But
Hmm.
if we don't have anything,
Hmm.
then we're going to be kind of waffling around and waving
Yeah.
around in the sea. So having something gives us that stability, and it gives us that basis to be able to go, should I say yes or should I say no? And
Yeah.
I think our yeses and nos are some of the most important decisions in our lives.
Yeah.
And so having a filter to run them
Mm.
through. And so for me, I go, if it's not for the audiences in my purpose statement, and it's not using my greatest skill and contribution to ultimately have the impact that I want to have,
Mm.
then it needs to be no.
Yeah.
And that helps give that
Well,
clarity.
and that's a good point, because I think sometimes we can be indecisive, but if we make that decision early and decisively at a high level, it actually helps make those other decisions for us.
Yes. It
Yeah.
removes the stress. It removes that pressure that can just get so heavy when there's so
Yeah.
much coming up.
Yeah, that's awesome. So before I jump into all of the questions I have, I do want to get your thoughts on the current crisis that we find
Yeah.
ourselves in. And I know you've written about and talk about the idea of leaning into a crisis. Politically speaking, sometimes that can be used as, people manufacture a crisis so
Mm-hmm.
that they get their political agenda done. But
Mm.
I think there's actually a lot more to it. And I don't know if you've read the book, The Power of Habit.
Yeah, so that's a good
But he
one.
talks about the idea of how malleable we are when we're facing that crisis, and how that is such a great opportunity. So tell us how we should look at this situation, and how you might recommend we navigate the crisis that we're in.
Absolutely. So for me, it started in the early to mid-March when this was kicking off. And in the role that I get to serve in at Chick-fil-A around strategy, a big piece of that is trying to anticipate the future and prepare
Mm,
our company for what we need to do to shift.
yeah.
And so I called up my dad. My dad, he's an incredibly wise businessman who started a aviation company
Okay.
back in the late 80s.
Yeah.
And during the 9/11 season, he started it, so he was president of it, but he had to walk the company through that crisis, which
Mm,
was really intense, especially for the aviation world.
yeah.
And so I called him up, and he is a man of a few words in a sense, but really powerful ones. And
Yeah.
I said, Dad, what's your advice? He said two things. He said, Elizabeth, cash is like blood. You run out of it, you die. And
Mm.
I was like, touche. That applies for businesses and that applies for individuals. So it's like, this is the time to stop spending, start conserving, and pull back.
Mm.
He said, the other thing is, he said, Elizabeth, just never waste a good crisis. And
Yeah.
at first I thought that is so incredibly insensitive. Like, how can you put the word good and crisis in the same sentence? That
Yeah.
just seems wrong.
Yeah.
And so my eyes were opened when he said that to observe and take in what was going to be happening over the coming weeks. And
Okay.
so through these past 7 or 8 weeks, with that filter and perspective that there is opportunity that is hiding
Hmm.
behind the awful parts
Yeah.
of it, the really heavy parts of it, because all of that is 100% true. But it also is 100% true that there is opportunity there. And so
Yeah.
4 main areas jumped out to me that if we have our eyes ready for that, the reality is that if growth is a flower, crisis is fertilizer. And
Hmm.
we have the chance, but
Yeah.
it's not going to just be thrust upon us. We can choose to do nothing. We can
Yeah.
choose to just sit. We can choose to actually atrophy. But if we want to, we can choose to see this as an opportunity and take it as a season to amplify our growth. And so four main areas have really stood out to me. I wrote a blog post on it
Yeah.
at
Yeah, definitely.
elizabethdicksonspeaks.com.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
Yeah.
been really a helpful filter for me and really brought to life those areas that we could actually improve upon instead of, get worse or just stay constant.
Yeah. And there is, I don't know if are you familiar with the parable of the farmer and the fig tree, the unfruitful fig tree.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
So the farmer, I think somebody comes to the farmer and says, I want to chop the tree down. He says, wait, give me a year and let me fertilize it and take care of it for a year. And if it still doesn't produce fruit, then you can chop it down. And so when you said that, kind of made me think of that as, this is an opportunity, especially for those of us that we may not have been intentional. And now it's an opportunity to go, okay, this could be an opportunity to change.
Totally. 100%.
Yeah. So when you think about leadership and your personal development, I mean, what does it mean to do that well? What does it mean to do that well in your work? And what does it mean to do that well personally, your family, community?
Yeah, all the dimensions, right? They're
Yeah.
all coming at you at one time. Well, I think about well-being. I think about it being very well-rounded. I always thought that I was going to spend the majority of my time staying at home with my kids someday. That was my aspiration. If you asked me when I was 10, what do you want to do someday? I was
Yeah.
going to be a stay-at-home mom. And God had a different plan for me
Yeah.
and put me into this business world. And I learned that that's something I'm really good at. And so making sure that I'm being the mom that I want to be for my kiddos and being the wife I want to be for my husband and being able to do my work well and have community, all of that is really important to me. And so I think to do it well, it means a few things. One of them is that someone has said before, you can have it all, but not all at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of that that's true. I also think you can kind of have it all, but at a different level of expectation.
Mm.
And so there's going to be meetings that I'm not going to be able to attend next week. A whole day meeting came up and I said, I'm so sorry, but it's not really, I'm sorry, but it's just, I won't be there for 2 hours because my son has kindergarten online graduation.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be my first priority. And it goes back to our purpose conversation. When we've defined our purpose and we understand our priorities, it isn't I'm sorry. It
Yeah.
is this is my priority. I can't wait to be there at 1
Yeah.
o'clock.
Yeah.
And so I
So
think,
so a lot of people might push back and say, well, they would either qualify that you have something they don't, or they would say that they're dealing with some problem that you don't have to deal with. So what's the habit of, one, identifying those boundaries, and two, enforcing them, and then also dealing with the conflict that might come from both of those?
that's good. So it's kind of like what's the principle behind it for those that might find themselves in a different life situation?
Yeah, or maybe it's not a different life situation, but they just perceive it that way
Mm,
because you're doing something that's harder or that can cause challenging, like if it's your boss and you're setting up, maybe they have a boss they have a hard time interacting with,
mm.
so it could be perception, it could be real, but ultimately, um, they're not able to be courageous in the way that you're describing.
Yeah, so a big part of it is, does the employer have a perspective that supports the whole person and that trusts? And I
Mm-hmm.
think when you're working for a company who doesn't support you holistically and doesn't have trust to say this is going to be what's best for that person, that's a different
Mm,
dynamic. And it's one that I would have a really hard time working for, because I want to
yeah,
work for a person or a company who trusts me and knows that I'm going to show up above and beyond if I have my priorities in order.
yeah,
And when they're not in order, I'm actually going to suffer majorly and my work is going to suffer, because that hour or 2 hours that I was going to be at kindergarten graduation, I'm not going to be contributing well, because I'm going to
yeah.
be resentful actually
Mm-hmm.
that I'm on a call instead of with my son. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Well,
get that.
yeah. So I guess I would ask then is, let's say you talked in one of your four things was about culture. So, um, what if someone doesn't have that type of culture? How could they move in that direction?
It's good. Well, the easiest way is to find a new job. It's the easiest and the hardest
Yeah.
in some respects because it's going to be a challenging employment environment
Yeah.
right now. But I think we all have an opportunity to create culture around us. And
Hmm.
so Clay Scroggins has a great book. I'm sure you've read it about when you're not the boss. How do you lead? You know, when you're
Hmm.
not in charge.
Yeah.
And so we all have an opportunity to create culture around us. Those are the choices that we make.
Yeah.
And so how can we create freedom and space and support for those people who are directly working for us or who are peers to us? Maybe we look around and go, hey, my coworker needs to have that kindergarten graduation time, and I'm going to cover for them and say,
Yeah.
hey, you know, Mike needs to be gone. I'm going to cover for him for this meeting. I think we all have a chance to step up and be an advocate for others and to be an advocate for what we think is right. And it's not always easy. And actually, if it's hard, it probably means that it's going to be really meaningful
Mm.
eventually. So I would just say, how can I create culture around me? And then going back to our purpose, what are those things that are going to be incredibly important to me 10 years or 10 months or 10 days from now?
Yeah.
Because being a part of that Zoom call for the additional 2 hours next week, probably not even going to think about it 10 days from now, but I will tell you 10 years from now, I will know and be able to describe the emotions I felt if
Mm.
I was or was not a part of my son's kindergarten
Yeah.
graduation. So I think that there are realities that people are in where they're not applauded to take that stand. At Chick-fil-A, there is a lot of grace and permission given there that they want you to be there where life matters most.
Yeah.
So that's a reality, but I do think that we have an opportunity around us to put some stakes in the ground and to also be an advocate for others and create that culture around us that we want to have. And
Yeah.
over time, it will start to spread.
So I guess on that note, when you think about this idea of, it's one thing to take a stand for yourself and to lead yourselves, which is seemingly impossible at times, but to then try and lead others, to teach them, to inspire them, to help equip or enable them in positive directions. How do we go about that, this idea of leading others or mentoring others or guiding others?
Mm. Well, I think it's really important to have people of different stages of life that are pouring into us and then we're pouring in to
Mm-hmm.
others. And I love the thought that leadership is not about how many people report to you, it's about who wants to follow you.
Yeah.
And so when you have those people who want to spend time with you and want to learn from you, and they have zero reporting structure to you, that's the strongest sign of
Yeah.
leadership to me. And so
Mm.
in my mind, those people in my life, I consider it the greatest honor to get to spend time with them. And I have a list of people that have dramatically impacted the trajectory of my life because they chose to spend time with
Mm.
me. And so I think the more willing we are to ask and
Yeah.
say, would you spend time with me? And the more willing we are to say yes when others ask to spend time with us. And then to just share life. And I had a call yesterday with one of the girls in my life that I love spending time with. And she's a season behind me in life. And we talk about what's going on, what's on our minds, what's challenging us. I'm 100% open with her from
Yeah.
a family perspective, work perspective. And then at the end of the call, we both ask the question, not prescribed, but it just happens. We both ask, what can I do for you? What do you have going on that I can do for you? And it's so rich and rewarding and life-giving to get to spend those moments
Mm.
sharing and receiving and then asking how we can serve each other.
Yeah. So a couple questions there. One, so there are a lot of great people that would make great mentors,
Mm.
but they're not mentoring anyone. Maybe they don't
Mm.
want to change their lifestyle, or they don't want to give up something, or they don't think they can do it, or who knows the reason, but it's going to vary. So what would you say to those people that ought to be mentoring but aren't?
I would say you have an opportunity to leave a legacy that extends far beyond your life
Mm.
when you do. And Truett Cathy, our founder of Chick-fil-A, one of the quotes, and there's many that I love from him, is how do you know if somebody needs encouragement?
Yeah.
If they're breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think sometimes the word mentor can feel a bit pious almost, like
Yeah.
I have everything all together and I am the mentor, like I'm a sage or something. When in reality, it's just coffee and talking about life. Like
Yeah.
just get coffee with somebody or have a video call with somebody and eat your lunch together and let them ask questions and share
Mm-hmm.
stories with them, because I think we often get to see the glamorous side of success. We get to see after the 20 years of hard work, but
Yeah.
every overnight success is 20 hard years of work in the making.
Yeah.
And the greatest people are the ones that can talk about when they got, knocked down and when they
Mm-hmm.
got back up and
Yeah.
when the 2008 crisis came
Yeah.
and they went bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't always hear those stories. And so to me, those who are not sharing their life in that way are missing out on one of the most rewarding opportunities to pass forward
Yeah.
their learnings, their encouragement, and to truly encourage, like instill courage in other people to put their boots back on and keep
Yeah.
going and make more cold calls and keep trying and get back up. So I would
Yeah.
say stop it and get out there
Yeah.
and just say yes, and don't see it as this wise sage situation where you have to have a super formal process, and just let it be a conversation where you can ask questions of each
Yeah.
other. And the other thing I'd say is having younger mentors is really, really important too. And
Okay.
so anyone who considers me a mentor, I consider them one, because they're
Like
teaching
we're mentoring each other almost in that way. I
us.
mean, yeah.
Yes, because they have a different perspective than me. They have something I can learn that I don't know,
Yeah.
and they see life in a different generational view. And
Mm.
so that helps me. I learn more things about technology and probably
Yeah. It's a
different
mutually
outlook.
beneficial, yeah, relationship.
100%.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone who, as someone that would be the recipient of that leadership and guidance that might think, well, I want to do my own thing, or I want to go my own way, or they're resistant to being, I don't know if I can accept someone's help, or I don't want to accept someone's
Mhm.
help. What
Mhm.
would you say to them?
You know, may the force be with you. Like, I think of it, I'm naturally the person that if you tell me this is the obstacle ahead, and you could go around it, if you go this way, I will take your advice. And there are some people out there that they have to touch the hot burner to realize that it's hot.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's hot. Okay, I'm not going to touch it. So
Yeah.
I would just say to them, if that's your personality style, I get that. And it's just going to be a harder journey for
Yeah.
you. But for those that are open to it, it is so rewarding to me, the times where you just get to sit and listen from someone and learn from them and get coached by them and be able to have that honest communication. It's so rewarding and life-giving to do
Yeah.
that. And so I would just say be bold and look right around you. There's going to be someone nearby that you can learn from who's walked through a crisis or a hard time before, that will be able to give you courage in a
Yeah.
way that you just can't manufacture yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So I want to shift a little bit to talk about stories. Narratives shape how we see the world. We are creatures that thrive on stories. We like to watch them, listen to them, read them. Fiction, nonfiction. So what are some of the stories that have shaped you in your journey?
Oh, that's so good. I love that question. Stories that have shaped me. I think, I mean, one that is critically important to me that I've actually taken this year to go back and read all the way through is all the stories within the Bible.
Yeah.
And so here you have this book that is filled with poems and stories and letters
Yeah.
that is full of life.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually gives life in a way that no other book does. And so I think that has been a huge one. I'm currently reading about the life of David,
Mm-hmm.
and he lived a really hard life. He
Yeah.
had such a song and a joy about him, but he lived a really hard life of being chased by Saul. And, Saul tried to kill him, and then he's leading the entire, all of Israel. And he lived a really, really hard life, but
Yeah.
yet he wrote so many of the Psalms that we read about.
Hmm.
And so that has definitely been one that is currently shaping my life right now. But
Yeah.
then in entirety is one that is a part of my purpose
Yeah.
and one that guides my life.
Yeah. So what if someone was like, wow, that's interesting, but man, the Bible's a really big book. Where should what story should I start with? Where should I
I know.
begin?
It is really big. So I would say if you were to start, it would be in Leviticus. I'm kidding. Don't start. But the I would probably start in the New Testament. If the Bible is a totally new book, I would start in the book of Matthew
Uh-huh.
and watch the story unfold from that point. If the Bible is something that you've dabbled in, but you want to start reading it through more, there is an app. It's called it's the Bible Recap by D Group, and it's a part of the Bible app that Craig Groeschel
Okay.
started, and it guides you through the entire Bible in natural sequence,
Yeah.
and it is awesome. And so you
Okay.
read a bit every day, and there's a podcast that goes with it, and it has really brought to life parts of history that I just hadn't fully put the pieces together for.
Mm,
So I highly recommend it.
yeah. So what would you say about stories in this crisis? Can they help us? Do they
Mm,
hurt us? Somewhere in betweens? Neither?
so good. I mean, I think in crisis, the stories are devastating, and they somehow, the ones that have hope are life-giving. And I think
Hmm.
it comes down to where is the hope? I read a very interesting statistic yesterday that came from Kantar Futures,
Okay.
one of the sources I use for strategy for Chick-fil-A. And anger has replaced hope as
Mm,
a top 5 emotion for Americans.
wow. And
Anger has replaced hope.
what do you think's going on there?
Gosh, I think that there's so much that's unknown. And I think as humans, we have a hard time with that. I
Is
think
it that we want to
especially
blame someone, that's why we lean into the anger, or is it anger with ourselves, or
that I don't know. I think we have a desire to control, to
mm,
plan. I talked about how I love planning and I
yeah.
love crafting goals. My calendar is blank. I mean, it says May,
But
and
was
then
it
it's blank.
filled up the months before May?
Heck yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
now it's
Color
just,
coded, like
yeah.
everything, like here we go. How many weekends we have downtime, what we fill our time with,
Hmm.
all that. It was beautiful, beautiful. But there's a lack of control. And I think a lot of
Mm,
times we're really uncomfortable with that lack of control. And so I think part of that is a control
yeah.
situation. And then some of it is maybe, yeah, we do want to figure out who's wrong or how do we fix this? And we don't have all of those answers.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's interesting that the emotion that has replaced hope is anger. And
Yeah.
so when we think about stories and where there is hope, it's like we can settle. But when we don't have a clear hope, there's anxiety and
Yeah.
stress, and then it turns to fear and anger. We just need to like get that
Yeah.
emotion out. So I just found that really fascinating and insightful to think about for ourselves. Like, where am I putting my hope? And is that
Yeah.
where I need to be putting it?
So I think what I'm hearing is we're feeling out of control and we're attaching to things that may or may not help us.
Hmm.
So how do we sort of rest in the idea that we don't have to know the answer, we can be uncertain, and we're
Hmm.
not in control?
Yes. Well, a coach for me, her name's Jen Bowie, and she's amazing. She has really taught me to pay attention to the tension.
Mm,
And so when we feel that tension inside, when we feel the anxiety, the anger, the frustration, wherever that tension is, pay attention and ask, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And what am I believing?
yeah.
Because those three are so intertwined, and our beliefs are going to drive our thoughts, which will then impact our feelings.
Yeah.
And when we can identify and articulate, hey, I'm feeling anxious, I'm thinking I have no control, and I'm believing that, fill in the blank for what the
Hmm.
belief would be behind it, then that gives us actual kind of it gives us control in a sense. It gives us some power over the subconscious that's going on in our minds. And over time, you talked about it in the beginning, over time, our brain is malleable enough that we can set new thought processes and lines of thinking in our brains. And so it gives us the chance to be able to rewire our minds into things that are true and into thoughts that are helping us go in the direction that we want to go.
And would you tie that into habits in any particular way?
100%.
Or new habits?
Yeah, we don't have as humans a whole lot of capacity for habit. I mean, for discipline, we have a lot of capacity for habit. And so I have a number of friends, because a really important ritual or habit for me is my morning routine. And friends will say, "Oh, Elizabeth, you're so disciplined." I'll go, "Not necessarily. I'm very habitual." And I turn what was a conscious choice into a subconscious habit.
Yeah, which probably was very difficult for a while, but then became easier over time.
Totally. I started with waking up 10 minutes earlier and then 15 minutes earlier and giving myself the motivation of a cup of coffee that's basically a donut in a cup because there's so much cream and sugar in it. But over time, it becomes where you have this entire habit built in. And so our thoughts, our beliefs, our habits, all of that is tied together.
Yeah. And then your living example, your story then inspires others to do that. Hey, they could do the same thing.
Yeah, I recommend it. I think our habits determine our direction in many ways. Like our yeses and nos each day are determining where we ultimately will go. We just sometimes don't think that my decision today is that powerful. And I'll give you a super simple example. But a friend of mine said the other day, you know, if you read 1 page a day, you can read a book a year.
Yeah.
I was like, really? He said, yeah. Most books are probably around 300 pages. If you read 1 page a day, you get a book a year. He said, so my goal is 20 pages a day because I'm going to read 20 books a year.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that breaks it down into something that's so bite-sized and doable. And when we do that with our physical health, when we do that with our finances, when we do that with our careers, whatever that is, when we break it down into something that we can say yes to today, then we ultimately end up getting to where we want to go.
Yeah.
But it's not as overwhelming. It's more than something we can handle.
Yeah, and that was similar to how I wrote my first book for freelancers. It was an hour a day, and I just did that, and eventually it was done. You know,
I love that.
Yeah. So, and then I didn't have a timeline. It was just that cadence, you know, and then when it was done, and then I moved to the next stage, and it took me, the whole process took me about 18 months. So,
do you still write an hour a day?
So it's kind of not right now. I was planning, I'm taking a break from writing this year. So I've written 2 books and over 400 articles over the last 6.5 years. And so I've taken a break this year from writing.
Well deserved. Do you think that will give you a good pause to be able to be inspired back later?
Yes. So part of it is to take a break from it, to kind of reflect and on the journey so far, also to think about what's ahead, and then just to kind of rest and recover and rejuvenate for the next leg of the race, so to speak.
I think that's so important because so many times there's a mentality of just like go hard constantly.
Yeah.
But the waves of oscillation are so important, because if we don't recover and rest and give our minds that space, then we won't be able to have our peaks as high.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's definitely, and it you know, you talk about innovation. It's also, it fosters a lot of innovation because it changes things in a way that jostles us, and at least for me, jostles me enough to kind of think differently and see things differently and behave differently, so that I can fuse new ideas and thoughts into what I've created.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
Good.
So let's talk about systems. So I love stories and I love systems. Systems, we are a part of systems. We create them. They shape and inform how we think, how we act, sometimes to degrees we understand and others we don't or don't appreciate. So what do you think about systems and how do you use them? You mentioned the calendar, so I imagine that's one of your systems. But tell me about that.
I do love a good system, a good process, a good framework. In work, I use it all the time. That is what I was asked to build a year ago, is to build a strategy system for us. And so now I'm in the midst of running that system.
Well,
But I think personally, a system that's really important to me is around decision making. And so I think the biggest part of it is being able to ask, is this urgent? Is this important? Or can I say no? And I think sometimes that no category gets pushed off, like, especially for those achievers out there, that it's either urgent or important. But I think there is always a third category of the simple word no, that it is a complete sentence. It doesn't have to come with a justification, but no.
Now, did you learn that lesson the hard way? I know for me, I was an overcommitter and I would say yes to everything and no to nothing, and it backfired really badly. So I had to learn that. Tell me about your story.
So the system that I have now is called my husband, John, and it helps me because I'll run things by him before I commit to them. There's other times though where I've just learned to be able to say no better, and my purpose is what helps me. So just because the opportunity is there, I know it doesn't mean that I need to be the one to take it. And having my purpose, it helps me say, okay, is this for my family or my community? Is this something that is going to use my greatest strength of creating new value? And will it ultimately help me glorify God? And if it doesn't fit into that, I have an easier time saying no, because Lisa Turkhurst wrote a great book on this. But when I say yes to one thing, I am saying no to thousands of things. And so to understand that, it helps us put our yeses where they really need to be. And as a result, we're going to need to say no to certain things.
So it's a really good filtering system. And I guess the two questions I have to challenge you is, how do you handle two bad decisions or two good ones? Like it's a bad or a worse decision, or it's a good or a better. And it's not as clear as a no or a yes, you know. You have to make a decision in either scenario.
That's really good.
A rock in a hard place.
A rock in a hard place. I think in the situation of a rock in a hard place, I take the longer perspective.
Okay.
You go, okay, so 10 years from now, when I look back, which of these decisions would I have wanted to take?
I like that. Like, will I have regretted doing one or the other?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Now, what about, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the other part with decision making is then if we find that we have urgent and important, the irony is that the urgent so often tries to cannibalize the important. And so here's an example from my life, is that I've got these two precious kiddos who are like nonstop energy. And then I have a
it's
job
always
that
urgent.
Yes. And sometimes though it's important, and I can put a meeting or a deadline in front of them. And the reason I know that I'm off is when I feel that frustration, and that, like I told you, Jen says, of pay attention to the tension. When I feel a tension that I'm not being the mom that I was created to be, I have to stop and pull back. And often I'm putting urgent over important. And there's a good chance that with that urgent work, somebody else could do it. I might be able to do it later, a little bit later. And then the other big thing is just taking the time to put the important tasks in first. So my morning routine is a big part of that. Exercise, time with the Lord, time with John. It's like the day has started off really strong because I have those three priorities done. And then I have special time with my kiddos before, like that's all before they wake up. And then I have special time with them. So when I can put the big rocks into the day, the important first, everything else can shuffle in and fit around it. So figuring those out and then being able to say what's important right now. So it might be important, but it doesn't have to be done now. So
and sometimes our deadlines are very superficial. They don't mean anything, and but yet we act as if it's like monumental.
Yes, I am on the Strengths Finder. My number one is Activator.
So interesting.
My life is constantly in a sense of urgency. So for me, it's a big one.
It's an internal one. What are your other top four?
Oh, Activator, Maximizer, Positivity, Woo, and Relator.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. We don't share any of the top five. I'm Connectedness, Strategic, Ideation, and I don't remember the others. But
Good. We would make a good team.
yeah, good compliments.
Yeah.
Now, you love systems, I love systems, but not everyone loves systems. So how do you persuade folks that are resistant to the system that would actually make their lives better or their work better or their life better? How do you get them to buy into the idea and to use them and to participate in them?
It's good. Again, I think it's hard. If you're not wired for something and you don't want it, you are going to be very resistant to it.
Yeah.
I think that some of those who might not like systems, they may just be naturally super creative and they don't want that structure. It feels like it confines them and restricts them.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways it does. And so it's, to me, it's acknowledging that certain systems may not be great for that individual. And then at the same time, I think looking around and recognizing where systems already exist in their life that they just might not be aware of, might be part of
Mm-hmm.
it. And then also, I think, where is their pain or challenge in their life that a system could help solve? And then
Yeah.
I think they're ready. It's the whole concept of when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And
Yeah.
so if we can find that pain in someone's daily life or weekly life where they're frustrated and then say, hey, here's a system that can help you with that, then they're going to be a whole lot more receptive and interested.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. So life can be hard, it can be challenging, it can be prosperous and joyful. What would be some of your final words of wisdom that you would share on how to navigate the journey and the ups and downs that we'll face and that we are currently facing?
I think that's good. I would say self-compassion
Mm,
and then compassion for others. I think compassion in general is a really beautiful act, a very beautiful emotion too. And so the more that we can show compassion to ourselves, not be so hard on ourselves,
yeah.
not expect so much out of ourselves, and to just be thankful,
Hmm.
thankful for who we are, thankful for how God made us,
Yeah.
and give ourselves a little bit of breathing room and
Yeah.
forgiveness. The amazing thing is that when we can show compassion to ourselves, then we're going to be able to extend that to
Mm,
others well. And when we're not showing it to ourselves, it's really hard to show it
yeah.
genuinely to others. So I would say self-compassion and then compassion for others.
Yeah. That's great. Anything else you wanted to share that we didn't get to or that I didn't ask about or that I skipped over?
I probably would just say, eat the chicken, and I'd love to stay connected and love everyone's thoughts on things as I'm writing and speaking. I love the interaction and thoughts, and I appreciate how you've asked great questions to me to challenge how I'm thinking and my perspective. I think that's always healthy.
Awesome. Well, tell us how we can connect with you, where you're at online, if people want to reach out.
Yeah, totally. So three options. There's .com, so ElizabethDixonSpeaks.com.
Okay.
On LinkedIn, that's a backslash Elizabeth Dixon Speaks after the LinkedIn part.
Okay.
And then on Instagram,
Okay.
handle Elizabeth Dixon Speaks.
Okay.
And so sequentially, it is less to more intimate in a sort. So .com is mostly writing and then speaking pieces. And then on LinkedIn, it's more professional. And then on Instagram, it's more of a peek behind the curtain, more personal.
Okay. All right. Well, sounds good. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, you too.